to Fish on Fridays. I'm Al McCauley, and every May 31st, the Catholic Church remembers the great feast of the Visitation. And this is, of course, when Mary has just found out that she is going to become the mother of Jesus, the mother of God, and she goes in haste to visit her cousin Elizabeth, who is already pregnant 6 months with John the Baptist. And I've done episodes on the Visitation before, specifically through the lens of different pieces of art. And this is going to be another one of those because for whatever reason, this story must be a muse for artists. And I want to share with you a painting that's of relatively recent vintage from 2007. And this artist's name is James Janknegt. And just at the first glance of this piece of art, you'll notice a few things. And it kind of looks almost abstract, kind of cartoonish in a way, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. It just looks it doesn't look necessarily realistic or real lifelike. So, but there's a lot of symbolism here that really gives us some insight into what's happening at the great feast of the Visitation. And let's start with the overarching context of this painting. What we see is this event is happening in the context of the suburbs, it looks like. Okay, nice houses, A-framed houses in the background. And although Mary and Elizabeth are portrayed, relatively speaking, like Judean women of the first century, the two gentlemen in the back are not. They look like they could be right out of our own time. And it's to remind us of the timelessness of the message of Jesus. I've said this in many episodes before. Jesus is for all times and all places and all people. And it's a common artist trick almost to use to paint something from the biblical times into our own modern times to represent the timelessness of the message of Jesus and the presence of Christ in our lives. So that's the overarching thing. But if we zero in on the two women up front, we see on the left, we see Elizabeth, and on the right, we see Mary. Now, you might say, well, how do we know that? Well, Elizabeth is an older woman and she looked gray. You can see a little frock of hair that looks gray there, so she's older. But you can also see who's in her womb. It's John the Baptist leaping, because we're told in Luke's gospel that when Mary's voice reaches her ears, that the baby leaps in the womb with joy. And there's John the Baptist with his foreshadowing John the Baptist as an adult wearing the camel hair clothing, and he's leaping for joy. And in Mary's womb, what you see is Jesus already enthroned with the crown on his head as king and pronouncing a blessing. So you see that the two children, the offspring of these women, are there. Now, it's fascinating, too, if you look into the colors. Elizabeth is wearing three predominant colors. Excuse me. Red, because her son's going to be martyred. He's going to die of martyr's death. He'll be beheaded by Herod. She's wearing green because of new life, because she was promised that she would no longer be barren. She would give birth to a baby. And gold, because it prefigures or foreshadows the reward in heaven that they'll have because of their saying yes to God and his plan of salvation. If you look at the right, you see Mary, there's three colors with her. She always has blue. Blue is the color of heaven, of the divine and proximity to the divine. So she has blue close to her chest. She's wearing gold because, again, she's going to be crowned eventually the queen of heaven herself. And so it speaks to her royalty. And the red that she wears on her veil is to remind us, although she did not die a martyr's death, she is going to be a witness to her son's martyrdom, her son's death, and his passion. And so she's oftentimes shown with red as well. Now, if you look at the aforementioned two gentlemen in the back, they are, you can look at them, you can see, well, who are they? Well, on the left, you see Zechariah. That's Elizabeth's husband, John the Baptist's father. And how do we know that's Zechariah? It's because when he was told by the angel that his wife was going to give birth, he didn't believe it. And so he was rendered mute. He couldn't speak until after the baby was born. And his first words were, his name is John. And that's what he's holding, is a piece of paper, a poster that says his name is John. And on the right, we see Joseph. Now, Joseph looked like he's ready to go off to work somewhere. Well, we know St. Joseph as a worker. He was a carpenter, and we have a feast day every May 1st, St. Joseph the worker. And so he's portrayed as that to remind us of his role. If you look to the far left of this painting, two other little symbols there is the ever-present tree to remind us that Jesus will die on a cross, that our whole salvation will come down to that cross, to that tree that Jesus hung on, but then he actually rose from the dead. So he takes this instrument of death and turns it into a symbol of victory. And perched on the branch of that tree is the Holy Spirit, is the dove. Over and above everything, overseeing, overshadowing all of these events is the presence of God through the Holy Spirit. One last thing I would like to say about this feast, this great feast of the Visitation, which I think is worth saying and noting, is that Elizabeth is the mother of the last prophet, if you will. Elizabeth represents the Old Testament, because her son John will be the last in the line of all these Old Testament prophets that are going to point to the Messiah. And Mary, conversely, represents the New Testament, the Christian scriptures, because it's her son. The New Testament is the story of her son, his life, his ministry, his death, his resurrection that saves us. And what's interesting is, in the Visitation, we're told in Luke's gospel that Mary travels in haste to Elizabeth. So what you have is the New Testament traveling in haste to the Old Testament to say, everything you looked for, everything you wanted, everything you hoped for in a Messiah, I'm coming to you. I'm it. I'm giving it to you by virtue of my son, Jesus. Mary's not it. Jesus is. But you get the idea. The Old Testament has been waiting for the Messiah. And here in the Visitation, we have the New Testament of Mary, embodied by Mary, going to the Old Testament embodied by Elizabeth. So just another way of looking at this wonderful feast day. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this helpful. If you'd like to share this content, that would be great. We'd love it if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Facebook. But either way, please tune in every Friday for Fish on Fridays. Until next time, please be good to each other, and God bless.